Good evening and welcome to the monastery. I haven't made a broadcast for a while because I'd had a surgery that prevented me from being able to broadcast. I've gotten a few questions, as we always do, and I think I'll try to touch upon one or two of them this evening. It was an interesting question that someone asked. Can I explain the mechanism by which the incarnation and the resurrection provide for us, or actually save us? What's the mechanism by which they save us? Now, I think that question is very telling because it's likely one of the ways that the West got into difficulty in understanding the whole mystery of redemption and salvation and came up with the legalistic juridical formula called atonement, because they were looking for a mechanism, but it had to be a legal mechanism. And they also could not grasp the fact that redemption itself has to be understood as a metaphor because it's a worldly expression. For example, if we have something in a pawn shop, we can redeem it back by paying for it. And if somebody's captured and carried away as a slave or in bondage and held for ransom, then we redeem them back by paying the ransom. Well, obviously, in talking about spiritual matters and our salvation, these things can only be considered metaphor and not expressions of some legal necessity or some legal mechanism. If one wanted to know the dynamic by which we're saved, I would have to say it's the co-suffering love of God for mankind is the actual dynamic of our salvation. The incarnation provides for the complete healing of the human nature itself. And when our Lord Jesus Christ took on the full human nature while remaining fully divine as well, in himself he reunited the divine and the human. And his life on earth, much of it hidden, not necessarily hidden as not being necessary for our understanding, re-sanctified human life and human existence, by which he brought the divine energy into the human nature and as grace bestowed this divine energy upon mankind as a means by which mankind could bring himself together and ascend once more toward unity with God. So the divine energy and the human energy, created energy, are both present in Jesus Christ. And energy is about relationships and communication. So the greatest communication of the divine energy to mankind is the incarnation itself. And it establishes a relationship then with the created energy or the energy of mankind. And this provides for our salvation, the healing of our fallen human nature, and the bringing us back into communion with God. And a part of the healing is the imparting to us the strength, with the help of divine grace, to begin to use our energies in a proper manner, because sin is the habitual misuse of our energies. So Jesus Christ has come, given us the example of the proper use of our energies, and bestowed upon us that grace, that divine energy, which allows us now to struggle and accomplish the proper use of our energies. And the resurrection itself is a part of the conquest of the power of death, in which Jesus Christ ransomed us from the power of death. Those of you who are priests and are serving the liturgy of St. Basil the Great will come across this very statement in the great Eucharistic prayer. He gave himself a ransom to death. Now obviously we're not talking in worldly terms or in legalistic terms about a ransom. Something spiritual took place, and we have to have a human language or word to express it. And so it's expressed with the expression ransom. One should not try to make ransom itself some kind of dogmatic expression. It's a metaphor for what our Lord Jesus Christ accomplished on our behalf by conquering the power of death and bringing us out from under the power of death. And this he could do by the divine energy. And he could bestow the energy upon us so that we could also inherit everlasting life in the fullness of time. So this is really the dynamic of our salvation. And when we try to look in some legal terms or some purely worldly terms, then inevitably we're going to misunderstand exactly what took place and try to find some kind of legal mechanism by which our salvation was wrought. Now, I realize that for many of our listeners, this is a bit complex, but it's something that we as Orthodox Christians need to learn and to assimilate into our understanding. And we had other questions, but I'm not going to go into too many of those this evening. I'm going to go on to another discussion of the aerial toll house question, and perhaps a little bit more about the question that somebody else asked, that when I talk about the Jesus prayer, about gathering ourselves together, collecting ourselves within ourselves, what is meant by that? Thank you, and God bless you, and thanks for joining us this evening. So.